Welcome to Sproutcast, where we speak with changemakers, social innovators, and entrepreneurs about how to make the world a better place. And now, here's your host, Julia Duffy.
Welcome back to Sproutcast. My name is Julia Duffy, and today we're speaking with Michael Dawson, CEO of CBB. Michael has unique experience gained in the not-for-profit, private and government sectors. He joined CBB in May 2010 from his role as Chief Executive with Victim Support Service, a statewide not-for-profit organisation in South Australia. Michael was Chief Executive during its growth to become the largest and most recognised organisation of its type in this field in Australia. Passionate about the not-for-profit sector, Michael has always held a strong interest in community service and social enterprise, sitting as a director or public officer on many voluntary boards of incorporated associations and startup services over many years. Currently, Michael serves on a number of boards and committees, including SA Council of Social Service and Legal Services Commission of South Australia. Welcome to Sproutcast, Michael.
It's a pleasure.
So you seem to have an extensive history in the NFP sector, Michael, and I was interested, and I'm always interested to hear about people's first experiences with the sector and how they first became involved. What's your story?
Well, I came from a private sector environment in management consulting in human resources, and I returned from an overseas assignment about a year before I joined what was then the Victim Support Service. And I had decided during that year back in Adelaide that I was very clear that I wanted to join a not-for-profit, and that's what I set about doing. And I really wasn't driven by any particular passion or love of particular issues at that time. But I just wanted to get into the sector and bring some of the learnings that I'd gained from essentially the private sector sort of business models into the sector, because I felt that the sector would be advantaged by having exposure to those sort of different ways of thinking. And that was what I started to do. I just sought a position that gave me a bit of influence to try and test my somewhat unthought through theories at that time.
So were there any surprises in that transition about, I guess, moving from the for-profit sector to the non-profit sector that you weren't kind of expecting? Was it very different than you were accustomed to or than you're expecting? I think some people probably listening to this hoping to make a similar transition, and so I'm sure they'd be interested to know what that experience was like.
It was such a long time ago now that I can't specifically remember, but I think the main things that probably surprised me that I can recall were that the sector had so many very passionate people and so many highly skilled people that were operating in an environment which wasn't enabling them to put those skills and experience and attitudes to their best effect. And so things like a slowness of the not-for-profit sector to do sort of a business case or analyse the fors and against of a particular project or initiative. The slowness to make decisions was a real problem at that time. I think that people's confidence and belief that the business way was unsavoury to some degree or always on about profit was quite untrue and an inaccurate presumption. And I think that the sector's moved considerably away from those inaccuracies to today being much more willing to accept that the business world is a lot closer to us in the sector than many of us think, and is willing to engage with us and help us, in fact, do things differently or better.
CBB has quite a unique and interesting history as a very early social enterprise. Could you tell us a little bit more about the history of the organisation, perhaps how it was set up and what its purpose is?
Sure. Maybe if I start with the purpose, our why, as we refer to it, borrowing from the thinking of Simon Sinek, who is a bit of a guru. We have found to be a bit of a guru in thinking about how you talk about your organisation. And I would certainly encourage people to find Simon Sinek YouTubes and to follow his train of thought, because we found it really useful. And our why, our mission, our purpose is really to enhance and encourage and develop the capacity and sustainability of the community sector, the not-for-profit sector, the social enterprise sector, whatever sort of language you want to use to describe subsets of that. That's really what we're about. So we're a not-for-profit, but we have to be a business, and that's, I guess, the social enterprise interpretation that I make, is that we have to have a strong purpose, strong mission, but we have to have a business-like attitude, and we need to, like any social enterprise, make a profit, because that's the only way that we can put resources and funds back into the sector, which is what we do with any surpluses that we make as a fee-for-service consulting and salary packaging organisation. So we're a professional services firm for the not-for-profit sector. So that's I guess the taking the last question first. The first question that you asked, if my memory serves me, was about the history, and we were formed just 20 years ago, and we grew from the quite iconic organisation that existed in South Australia at that time, the Spastic Centre of South Australia, and that service was split into its different parts, and several incorporated bodies were formed from one, and that division was around services for people with disability, and the range of services being either personal care type services or professional support services, those sort of things, as against accommodation and centre-based respite services. So two separate organisations were formed around those missions, and CBB, which stands for the Community Business Bureau, and still does, although we don't trade with that name, was formed out of the corporate services part of that larger organisation, if you like. So payroll, financial management, property management, OH&S, all of those corporate services, and promotion marketing, if you like. Those services were provided out of the corporate services sort of office, and that was what CBB was created from, and it was incorporated separately from the other organisations, and was given a very small grant from the government to set itself up as a fee-for-service organisation to not only the two organisations which were its partners, if you like, in the split or prior to the split, and also promote and sell its services of the same nature to the wider not-for-profit community, which is what it then set about doing.
The model that you've kind of been talking about, the fee-for-service and kind of social enterprise model, is something I understand CBB has been doing for a while, and it's now something that we're seeing other non-profit organisations and social enterprises taking up. And so from this experience of having of the organisation having done this for a long time, I'm wondering if you have learnings and advice for organisations that are in the earlier stages of doing this about kind of what has worked and what hasn't worked and how your challenges have changed over time.
Sure. Okay. I need to point out that I've only been here 5 years, so it's really the last 5 years I have more knowledge about.
Yeah.
But I do have some about the sort of startup of the organisation. I think that some of the critical success factors, which is really, I guess, what you're asking, is to have a very strong focus on mission. I think that's something that we talk about, and the marketing gurus probably talk about. We need to have a focus, a clear articulation of our purpose, and in Simon Sinek's language, our why. And that can really serve to enkindle a passion, and a passion that I think one should not be frightened of throwing out there, of showing that passion and that commitment to what you're really on about, because it's that which people buy or engage with, and I think that's the most important piece of advice about what to try and get right first. If you can't get that right first, you're always going to struggle to articulate that story and describe what it is that really makes you or the organisation tick. So that would be my first thought. Second thought would be to really take a quite a business-like focus, and I think that's much more permissible within our sector nowadays than it was 20 years ago. I think, in fact, it's respected. And any engagement with business-oriented stakeholders or sponsors or investors are going to expect that. You need to be business-like and efficient in one's language, one's planning, and how you express that. I think that one of the things that certainly served me very well is to have a people-first culture in the organisation, and that starts from the leadership, and whether that leadership be the board or the senior management or both. But a people-first culture, I think, has been really strong, a strong success factor in what we've done. Maybe I'm a bit biased given that my background is psychology and human resources, but I really have an inherent and strong belief in the fact that I think we rely on people to put our systems, our marketing, our business processes into place. And most businesses are people-oriented, so the buyers are people. And it seems to me essential that we get the right people to do the right job, and we match those people together. So I guess that's one bias that I have. I think, which will be no surprise, and another factor is for getting one's market research right. And I don't just mean the generic sort of impression that yes, there's a market there, yes, there's a need, and yes, we can work to fulfil that. I think one needs to drill down a bit further than that and really ask what it is that the market will buy, and how much will they actually pay. Because there's one thing to have an understanding about, what you want to sell and how much you think you're going to charge for it. But you need to understand clearly what the other side is going to pay, because you might be making a judgment which is inaccurate. And I think that's the more work that can be done on getting that right, the better business case you put up for potential investors in a social enterprise sense, and other stakeholders who you want to engage. I think that's really, really clear. I think the recruitment of a good leadership team first, which does include your board or management committee or whatever it might be, that needs to be a diverse range of people with the right expertise in the areas in which the social enterprise is going to operate. I think that's really, really important. And people with the time, as well as the expertise and the knowledge to contribute, because there's no point in having the highest powered people if they're not going to have the time and the passion to commit to this new enterprise. Obviously, financial expertise is vitally important. It probably goes without saying, but I think it is important. You need to have people who really are very good at the level of establishment financing and how you record numbers, how you process numbers, how you analyse numbers to think about accurately where you're going and drive some decision making. A couple of other things. I think it's really, really good to have a high horizon, or eyes on a big vision, if you like, not to limit that vision in terms of the passion, the conceptualization of where you're heading. The limitations come to that when you start business planning around what can I do, how am I going to implement, what steps do I need to do, in what order. So that, I'm not sure if that's clear, but managing a high horizon, a high powered vision, with also looking down at your feet and your toes and where you're going to step, and not losing sight of that strategic vision. Really important, I think, these days, even more than ever before, is to have a process of measurement of outcomes and the impact that the enterprise is going to have, because you will need that to report back and to justify either further investment or change of direction or continuation in a particular business direction. I think that's really important, and you need to start measuring from day one, not from year 3, for obvious reasons. But it's something that we put off, I think, but we need to come back and start measuring and being clear about what we're measuring from the very, very beginning. That's probably my key things.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a lot to think about, really. And and so your last point actually was something that I was planning to come around to ask you about, really, and I guess it connects back to what you first mentioned about having a strong focus on your mission. So I guess measurement of your organization's impact, it brings that full circle, that you're ensuring that not only are you aware and focusing on your mission, but you're making sure that it's something that's actually what the organization's bringing about. And I understand that the idea of being a high impact organization is something that you are quite interested in at CBB. I was wondering, a little bit beyond what you've just said, how people can ensure that their organization is high impact.
I suppose some of the key things would be some of those things that I've just mentioned, but high impact for me probably means, and I think it's underestimated, and we're not very good at it in the not-for-profit sort of community sector, is to really have a good focus on your communication strategy. Whether one calls that marketing and communication or not, I don't mind, but communicating is just so vitally important, I think, to spread the love, I suppose, but to ensure that the people who need to hear about the organisation and what it has to offer, do so. And unless that happens, it doesn't matter how good the organisation is or how good a business is in producing widgets or providing a service, unless that word is spread in the right way to the right people, there will be no impact. The organisation will not gain any traction. And I think that our sector is not really very good at that. It thinks of marketing as selling, and that's why I use the word communication. But in both the organisations and not-for-profits which I've run, I've really had a very strong commitment to communicating what it is we're about very clearly in a smart way, in a modern way, an eye-catching way or an ear-catching way, to ensure that people understand succinctly, or from a succinct description and narrative, what it is we're on about and what it is we are trying to offer. Now, I think that spread is really, really vital to having any impact at all. I think that it's picking up on the last point of measurement, I guess. And the social impact, if that's what we are hoping to have, is really hard to measure. It's really hard to monitor, and it's really hard to see the outcomes, especially in a short time frame. So I think that the social impact for the technologies and systems for measurement and how social impact is described need to be really well understood from the very beginning, before even starting on that journey, because you're really going to need to be able to tell the good stories, tell the successes, to show what that social impact can be or what other impact is, to enable a new stakeholder group to buy into that enterprise. And I think they're probably two of the least spoken about but most important things in terms of high impact. I mean, the others are more obvious about having an innovative approach, having a quick success, having good people who are going to stay for a considerable time to make sure there's continuity in terms of obtaining impact and consolidating that impact, because otherwise, if the impact is only short term, it can, once you take your foot off the accelerator, if you like, that can drop away and you lose that impact. So it's got to be in place for some period of time, enough period of time to stop it falling away when other factors change, like key leaders or that sort of thing.
Now, something else I'm interested in discussing with you is I guess, moving from the position of having a fantastic idea or a new innovative approach for something, which I think is a position that probably a lot of our listeners are in, where they do have this acorn of an idea and they've got the passion to make it go somewhere, but then getting to the next stage, getting to a place where they can actually start to join with other organisations or launch something themselves. Do you have any advice for that stage of moving from an idea to making something a reality?
The quick ones are the sort of the ones you certainly, the lessons you learn from business about the marketing, about being clear, about ensuring you've done your market research, defining whether there's a need, and the price structures and the market segmentation, all of those things, which I think are fairly well spoken of. The things that I would offer would be some of the less obvious and overt sort of things, I guess. And I think that's things like, and it is my bias, I suppose. So I'm not saying it's necessarily the be-all and end-all, because my bias is sort of the people, and, my style is consultation and, getting information and talking to people. But I still think that is really important in becoming informed, very well informed, building the right team of mentors, advisors, champions, if you like, by talking to them, having the courage to go and talk to people and just float an idea. Have the courage to say, this is what I'm thinking, and this is how I think it will have impact. What are your thoughts about that? Because I think that people in general love to help other people. And I think it's really easy to draw ideas and information out of others. I guess the cynics might say that what you're doing is exposing potential competition to your idea and your intellectual property. But I think there's ways of couching this to engaging in conversation and identifying the right people to be able to have that full and frank discussion with. And I think that there are a lot less problems out of doing that than the cynics might think and say. So I would encourage people to talk to as many others as they can. And many of those may then become people you go back to and engage with at a later date when you're more clear and want to engage them in a particular role that they might fulfill in developing the enterprise. I think that if an entrepreneur doesn't have a passion and a real belief that this thing, whatever it is, can work, that I would really be thinking, don't start, because you're going to need to have a really strong passion to generate the energy and enthusiasm for something that it's going to require to follow it through. So if there's not that real love of it and passion for it, I would think maybe the timing's not right, or the offering is not right, or the person's not right. Other bits of advice, I suppose, to evaluate, and I think I've probably already said this a number of times, but to evaluate and get the evaluation set up from day one, because you'll need to show the change, and you may get your biggest change in the first period of time once you start an enterprise. So you need to be recording before you start, not later when you've lost the opportunity to show that immediate success. Be very willing to seek advice, but evaluate that advice before you jump in and take it. Be very careful that you assess that advice. What else? Let me think. I guess being visible, being willing to be visible. If you're not visible, and it goes back to that whole communication piece I was talking about, you've got no chance. You have to have a visibility and be willing to stand up and talk about publicly the enterprise and what it's going to offer, and be passionate about that. I think more on the business sort of business style is to make sure that that there's very much an action orientation. So where you promise something, make sure you deliver it. There's nothing worse than over promising and under delivering. People expect some outcomes and actions. So I think a lot of people have very good ideas, a lot of people have great intention, but they don't follow through and revisit things and just go that extra mile to consolidate actions, rather than just expect that something will be achieved with one small success but to keep building on that, keep going back to it, and keep growing that action. I think a positive attitude. Again, maybe one of those things that goes without saying, but I think it's probably not said enough. And our sector, certainly the community services sector, is not very good at shouting about its successes and being positive. We need to have almost a blind positiveness being expressed to engage people and build that enthusiasm and desire for something. So I really believe that without that positiveness, there's potential failure. And I guess the antithesis of that is not being negative. And I think, squeaky wheels, complaining about other things, complaining about, why we didn't get there, why didn't we make it, why didn't we achieve that target, is not helpful. It might be that you are honest internally in developing your enterprise about that, but it's not the sort of thing that you talk about publicly. And I think you need to be honest in your analysis and your self development around those criticisms. But I don't think it's very helpful to talk about them publicly when you're trying to engage new stakeholders. That's probably about it, I think.
Wonderful. Now, one of the final questions I wanted to ask you is along similar lines, but for someone who is thinking of becoming involved in the sector, but not necessarily starting their own organisation, did you have any suggestions for how they could become involved in a more general sense?
Begin conversations, I guess. There are a lot of people with ideas or opportunities to engage in either established organisations or new ones or emerging ones. They're all often looking for more people than they can find, and spreading the word about your own availability and your own skills or your own desire to learn can be quite well received and could easily create opportunities. So not just including, but not just sort of traditional volunteering sort of activity, of which there is an enormous amount in a wide range of fields, but also offering to go on to management committees or think tanks or newly formed boards, which is often where people who are trying to develop something have trouble getting people to engage because of the potential or perceived risks with doing that, or the perceived issue of being given a treasurer's job or a deputy chair's job on a board or something like that. That often puts people off, and it makes it hard to then fill boards with experienced people. But I think there's a lot of opportunities to join boards to gain the sort of governance experience that is really being more and more sought after these days. So that would just be a couple of things, I suppose.
Wonderful.
Finding something, with doing that, I think, again, the principle of only really joining things which you do feel strongly about is important, because otherwise you won't retain your interests, and it will be a burden rather than a stimulating and event of that has a good feeling.
Well, it sounds like you're saying also having openness to what's out there and having conversations with people first to fill the gaps in your knowledge, I guess, of what you don't necessarily know.
Yes, absolutely, I think. And having not being embarrassed or whatever about not knowing something. I mean, most people don't know about everything. So it's quite refreshing to meet people who say, "Oh, tell me about what you're trying to do. Tell me about your organisation. I've never heard of you, or I've never heard of this issue, or I've got no idea about how to do this." And people, going back to one of the things I said earlier, people love to help. It's a natural instinct, I think, that many of us have, and certainly the people in the not-for-profit and social enterprise sector have as a general characteristic in common.
Well, that leads on to my final question, Michael, which is returning to your experience in the non-profit sector, and I guess just what you're excited about in the sector right now that you're involved in or aware of, or do you have any stories of times when something you've been involved with in this space has really surprised you or impressed you?
Yeah, there's just so many, really. I mean, every day you spend in the sector, if you're out and about, there are so many things that are going on that are really exciting and unusual, and provide an opportunity to showcase successes. And there's a particular organisation here in South Australia, based in Adelaide, which is really exciting. It's a service for homeless people, and they have not been flush with funds, I think it would be fair to say, but they've never seen that as a barrier, and they have seen that lack of money as an opportunity to think outside the square and to come up with new and brave ideas, and a willingness to say, well, we've got nothing to lose. And so they've really gone out and done so many things, and getting now, through that exposure and the successes, they're now getting people coming to them without being approached, to either find out about them, ask how they've done it, how have they addressed their culture, what sort of staff have they recruited, how have they recruited to ensure people have got the same values, right through to corporates who are saying, this is such a success story, we would like to be part of it, and they've drawn those sponsorship opportunities in by just being willing to go out there and be brave, and show that they're being innovative, and that they've got a strong commitment to what they're doing, which is infectious almost. And that's the Hutt Street Centre in Adelaide. And that's a really exciting story from a small organisation that's grown from very small, humble beginnings to quite an ambitious sort of agenda ahead. And I think that's a really, really good story. I think not that I've been involved with them, but the Think Water, I can't remember what it's called now, but the charity which provides funding to various causes from selling bottled water.
Thank You Water, I think.
Thank you. That's it. Yes, Thank You Water. And now I've heard about them through being associated with social traders, and I think that's a really exciting story that has just gone mad. And I think that's in many ways through the braveness and the willingness to get out there and take the world on, that success has come. So I think that's really exciting. At a different level, there's a community housing organisation, again in South Australia, that has really adopted a go out and seek approach with the private sector, and they sought to engage with the private sector for sponsorship and commitment in corporate social responsibilities at a time, not only money, with that program and that development of affordable community housing. And I think that the engagement with the corporate sector through their corporate engagement program has been really, really adventurous and really different, and certainly from my knowledge of a number of organisations in the sector. And that's really, I think, quite a significant and significantly successful approach. And that's Junction Australia, which is now a national housing association. So there's a couple of examples. There are quite a lot of good things going on in aged care too. And one of the principles that often is operating here, I think, is one of collaboration and cooperation rather than competition, if you like. And I think that there are various organisations getting much better at reframing what could be a competition sort of attitude which holds them back to one which looks for collaborative opportunities to work together with previous competitors or even current competitors to develop something new and different that they couldn't do on their own. So I think that whole mentality about joining ideas with other people and building things in partnership and collaboration is a really, really powerful model. And I think that the more we move towards that, the more successes there will be.
Hopefully that's something that we will be seeing more of in the sector, and I think perhaps we are moving in that direction. And you've given us some fantastic examples of organisations that perhaps people can go and look up for themselves and even get in contact with them and learn
By all means.
from what they've done. And I think you've given also the listeners a lot to think about from your own experience and your own work today that I'm sure they'll find valuable. Finally, I just wanted to ask you where people can get in touch with you or CBB if they wanted to get in touch or wanted to learn more.
By all means, thank you. CBB is the Community Business Bureau, and we have been trading as CBB, the not-for-profit people, of recent couple of years. So if people just Google CBB, it will be easy to find us. And we're based in Adelaide. We're a national firm, and we've got clients in all states and territories. We are certainly a social enterprise, and we put our funds back into the community through our community development program and various other activities. Now, if people want to, they can see me on that website, and by all means make a call to us and say where you come from, and I'd be happy, as would any of our senior staff, be happy to have a conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been my pleasure.
Did you enjoy this episode of Sproutcast? Visit sproutcast.net to sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter includes copies of the show notes and additional content from each episode.